It's really special to me to be here today. We're not just doing our first deployment in the context of what we've spent the last 11 years working to realize here in Arizona, here in Scottsdale, but we're building our company here, and we're building a group of phenomenal people who are going to be very core to what we do nationally and what we ultimately do internationally. And I've been overwhelmed with the talent and the drive and the passion of the people that we've met here and their commitment to making a difference and to changing the world. I built Theranos around the belief that it's a basic human right for every person to have access to actionable health information at the time it matters. Anyone who's gone through the process of losing someone because you find out too late in the disease progression process to be able to intervene knows that nothing matters more than being able to change that. And there's nothing you wouldn't do to be able to go back and have done something sooner. But the way our healthcare system is set up, insurance won't even pay for a lab test to be done unless someone has a symptom of a disease, which means we're determining someone has cancer from the fact they have a tumor, which means we're finding out too late so often to be able to really do something about it. If you look the word diagnose up in the dictionary, it will say to determine the onset of disease from its signs and symptoms. But by the time you're symptomatic, by the time you have a tumor, progression has already happened to the extent that it's difficult to begin to change outcomes. And our dream with Theranos is to begin to make it possible to see the onset of disease in time for therapy to be effective. So we've built this mission of access to actionable information at the time it matters around several core tenets. We got into the lab business because lab data drives 80% of clinical decisions. And if we can make that lab data more accessible at the time it matters, we can begin to change outcomes. So access for us starts with being able to shift the paradigm of traditional phlebotomy, the paradigm of people having to go take vials and vials and vials of blood in order to get a simple test done. I was listening to one of our team members talk about a physician here in Scottsdale who described the process of a little girl who'd just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She was 11, and her mother explaining to her that she was going to need to go get a lab test done resulted in what this physician described as the tantrum of a 2-year-old. Anyone who has watched a little girl, a little boy, go through the process of having to be held down, tears streaming down their face in order to get their lab test done, understands that access to that information that can help to change those people's lives is limited by the fact that in order to get that data, we have to go through such painful experiences. I've seen it in my own life with people I love having gone through cancer, and they're so strong, and they go through so much with the kind of treatments that people have to go through today, and the kind of testing that they have to go through week after week after week. It just breaks them down, and it breaks those who love and care for them down. And if we can make it possible for every person to be able to do their lab tests from tiny drops of blood, starting with the first sets of tests that we've introduced here in Phoenix, in Arizona, from tiny drops of blood from a finger, as opposed to vials and vials of blood coming from the arm, we can begin to engage more people in the testing process so that we can begin to get access to the information that we need in time to be able to do something about it. Access for us is also about transparency. We, as individuals, pay for our lab tests. We should know every time what it's going to cost us before we go do a test. The concept of getting a bill in the mail after you've done a test for hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, and you don't even know that that's what you're going to have to pay for, limits access to testing. We know so many people who we've been privileged to serve through what we call our wellness centers, which are the service centers that we've been opening here in Arizona, who will come in and tell us, I would have been charged $1,000 for a lab test, so I've been putting it off for a year because I couldn't afford it. And we've been so humbled by the people who have come in with years' worth of lab requisitions, who are coming now because they can, and because they're not as scared to be able to get it done. I was listening to another physician here talking about the fact that they had a patient who came in for an $80 visit, and then they ordered one test for this patient, which cost $150. And they were saying, how could it be that a single test is costing this person more than my visit? And they were talking about someone who didn't have the ability to afford a $150 test. And we had the opportunity to serve that person, and their test cost $12. That creates access to actionable information at the time it matters. Access for us is also about convenience. It's about making this testing process human. We like to think about it as having a heart in the context of people coming in for these services, having it be something that they want to do. I've talked so many times about an email we got from a woman named Fran who came to one of our wellness centers here in Arizona. And she sent a very long email about the fact that she thought that the lab testing experience was so much fun and she couldn't wait to go get it done again. And I love that email so much because you don't normally see people walking around being like, that was awesome, let's do it again. And we need to shift the paradigm in terms of consumer engagement in the testing process, because if people engage with this information, if we start to recognize that we have a basic right to the information about our bodies and a basic right for our family members, our moms and dads, our kids to get this information so that we can begin to see the onset of disease in time to do something about it, we will change our healthcare system, because there's so much that you can do if you find out early in the disease progression process. So access is about access to actionable information. And if we can reduce the sample size associated with testing we can make it possible to run more and more tests from a tiny droplet of blood so that when someone gets a requisition done, instead of going through the paradigm that exists today, which is I go see my doc, doc says, Elizabeth, haven't seen you in a year, go do a lab. So I go do my lab, come back, doc says, you know, your hemoglobin was really low. I don't know what kind of anemia that's associated with, but I'm going to put you on this drug, go do another lab test, because now I need to figure out why that value was out of range. And the reason I need to go do another lab test is because now different tubes, maybe they took a purple top the first time, now this time they need a green top, and other color tops have to be drawn. And then come back for my third office visit, at which point they finally get this data, say 6 weeks later, take you off an initial drug, and let's say it's iron deficiency, right? So they've switched your therapy because now they have the lab data that makes the diagnosis actionable. Well, if the sample size is tiny, you can begin to build into the physician ordering process that if something's out of range, I want to run those follow-on tests right there in the initial lab so that when I see my patient, that visit becomes actionable. And if we can shift the reality in our world today, which is that 40 to 60% of people do not go get those tests done when physicians tell them to do it, that engagement, that compliance will begin to make it possible for physicians to have the actionable information to take care of people at the time it matters. Healthcare in our country is the largest driver of bankruptcy today. I was talking at lunch about the fact that we've seen people traveling in from Nevada or in buses across the state here to be able to come to the locations that we've created here because of the fact that we've decided to bill Medicare, Medicaid, and everybody else the same price, and a price that's discounted off of their reimbursement rates, starting at less than 50% of their rates. That means that over the course of the next 10 years, we have the opportunity to save taxpayers in Arizona over $1.3 billion in direct out-of-pocket savings. And what's so exciting to us is that this can be a model for what can be done nationally. I believe that the solution to our challenges in healthcare is the individual. And if we can engage people, we can begin to change outcomes. Because it's very difficult to do it working through the system. But if you can begin to change it, I talk all the time about the fact that 20% of our entire healthcare spend in this country is associated with type 2 diabetes. And we have 80 million Americans who are pre-diabetic. 90% of them don't know it. And yet if they did, and we could begin to give them the tools to understand the fact that you can reverse it through lifestyle, through diet, through exercise, we start to change our healthcare system. And my dream for what we do here in creating this model in Arizona is that we show, through engagement of the individual, we can begin to shift the care delivery system, and we can begin to show that a preventative care model is possible. And we're doing that now. This future that we're talking about is here, and we can't think of a better place to be able to do it than here in Arizona. It's wonderful to be here with you.